Welcome to this episode of the Future Insight Podcast. I'm thrilled to have you with us as we explore the ideas, innovations, and emerging trends that are shaping tomorrow's world. Whether you're tuning in from home, on the go, or during a break in your day, we're glad you chose to spend time with us. Today, we're excited to welcome our guest to the show, an expert and thought leader whose perspectives will help us dig deeper into the innovations and breakthroughs driving the future. Our guest is Dr. Leva Harrison, Associate Professor of Musical Theater and Voice at the University of Alabama. Thank you for joining us. We can't wait to hear about your experiences and research. But before we begin, I always ask our guests to provide us with just a little bit of insight into your professional journey that brought you to the position that you currently hold at the University of Alabama.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Cantu, for having me and for that very nice introduction. I come to the world of academia from the professional world. So I was a working singer based out of New York for almost 20 years, and working to establish and build a career. And just jump ahead, September 11th occurred, and that had an effect on the country and artists alike. So I decided to go back to school. I had the professional experience I had, but I didn't think that it was enough. So I decided to get the terminal degree so I could get more than a foot in the door and transition into teaching in academia. And so that's how I ended up. I enjoyed teaching. I did it when I earned my master's degree, and I enjoyed it. And I got support from instructors who said I had a knack for it. And so I decided I could still be involved with music and then share with others what my experience had been and continue to learn myself.
Excellent. I know that on your faculty webpage there at the University of Alabama, it makes note of the fact that your artistry transcends traditional boundaries in reference to your time as a working singer and an educator in New York City. Could you sort of help us to better understand what that means in terms of your life experience and kind of discuss how and why you were successful in doing that?
Persistence and perseverance, I would say, help with the level of success that I achieved. I mean, today, entrepreneurship, as far as artists are concerned, is really very important. Having a supportive network is also very important. I finished undergraduate school, and it was a couple of years after that I moved to New York. There are gaps in between receiving degrees. So essentially, I went and I gained some experience and got work, and then I realized I needed to focus more on my technique and study. So I went back to school and acquired another degree, which allowed me to focus on that. And then once I had that, I came back to New York, which allowed me to achieve another level of success. I say persistence and perseverance because you're constantly auditioning for work. We're, independent contractors. So I had to work. I had to find jobs to support myself because my father was like, handle your responsibilities. And so in between working, I had to find jobs that gave me the flexibility to audition. And then when I received contracts, to go out and honor those contracts. So that I was able to do that again, just with having a strong network of support, good teachers, and preparation.
Excellent. And talk a little bit further about that, specifically how these early experiences in New York City have served to shape or inform your current role as Associate Professor of Musical Theater at Alabama?
Well, I do understand the audition process, which helping students to understand, which I had to learn, that to not take these things personally, that it's a business. That's the bottom line, and you either can fill a need that's there or you don't. The persistence comes in, where I always share with my students to set their own goals for an audition. The contract is the frosting on the cake. That's the pinnacle, yes. But to go into the audition and know what you want to accomplish yourself. It's hard to accept no's, and especially if you receive in the moment very positive feedback, but then you're not offered the job.
Mm-hmm.
So it's building I think an emotional and mental capacity to handle that, so that you continue to pursue and to understand that that whole thing of what's meant for you will ultimately become yours.
In reviewing the research that you've been engaged in, one of the things that I noted was that you oftentimes have adopted an interdisciplinary approach to that research. One example in particular that's cited on your website is the work you did as a member of the inaugural cohort of the Collaborative Arts Research Initiative fellow with Carrie. And there's one project in particular there that, if you would, I'd like you to talk about that work and your efforts and that collaboration culminated in, and that was the release of a short documentary film titled "The Visit."
Yeah, thank you. That was one of my first collaborative research projects with Kari. It was with an associate history professor, Dr. Hillary Green, whose research deals with the resiliency of former enslaved individuals. And in teaching one of her classes, she had a student question whether or not slavery existed on the campus of the University of Alabama. And so she turned that into a class research project. And in doing so, and going into the archives at the university, she found information with reference to a former enslaved individual who is credited with starting the first public schools for the children of former enslaved individuals in Alabama. And so this gentleman educated his own children at Tuskegee University, which was started by Booker T. Washington. And what Dr. Green found was information on an address that Booker T. Washington gave to the citizenry of Tuscaloosa. And the importance of this event, this Benjamin Barnes is the former enslaved individual who invited him and facilitated this, is that it was the first public event achieved by folks from both races and by dignitaries within the city of Tuscaloosa, the mayor and others. So my contribution to this research in her finding the program and excerpts of the speech was that Washington gave was to reproduce that program. So that inquired some other research. We went to Tuskegee. The COVID set in. So that put a damper on things. And the result of COVID not being able to present this as an in-person performance was to create this documentary. So it allowed me to interact and get support from a documentary filmmaker, to research and find the music from the program, hire other singers. We actually, because of COVID, there were 4 of us as a quartet. This address took place at the First African Baptist Church in Tuscaloosa, and we were able to film it in that church. And so, yeah, so the result of this was breathing life into the research that she had found historically and breathing life into it to create this documentary film that could then be shared and shown around.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that with us. In looking at your other research, I know one of the things that we find is still with us, even though it may officially be over, the COVID-19 pandemic. It is not over in terms of the legacy of that, the impact it had on our students, on us as educators as well. And you did an article during the pandemic in 2021, and you titled it "Let Go of Why, Figure Out How." And in reading the article, I understand what you meant by that. If you could share with our listeners what exactly that meant, and how that was something that you tried to communicate to your students to help them during the pandemic.
Well, that, yeah, that is a consequence of the pandemic. Students would ask, well, why this way? And when it comes to, because so much of what we do in life has to do with a process, and singing is about awareness, physicality of it. So I started to get my students to think about how they were creating certain sounds,
Right.
and work in an effort to help them find an ease in creating the sound versus trying to muscle or being overly aggressive. So the how was getting to function of the voice, the fact that in speech and in singing, the air has to flow, and then the words, the vowels are on that air. And so it's help getting them to start thinking about how they were able to create certain sounds and not necessarily the why of the sound. It got them to be a little more curious. We just began exploring like just various sounds that they're able to create, and all of it to get them to really calm themselves and think about what they were asking their voices to do versus deciding that they wouldn't be able to do it before they attempted.
Hmm.
Because I would have some students say, well, it's not going to sound right. And my question would be, but how do you know that? You haven't attempted. So let's talk about the how of this, and what's happening. So that was to get them to start thinking in a different way with reference to the physicality and the function of sound, and their thinking, how your thoughts, when you're thinking something won't
Right.
happen, you're impeding yourself from creating it.
Exactly. Exactly. It transcends not just what you were doing in the classroom, but to life, sort of writ large, if you will. Not, why can't I do that becomes, how can I do that? Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Um, you in the article, you make what I think is a powerful statement regarding your experiences and what you would communicate to students during the pandemic. And I'm going to quote what you say. You were asking students, "Are you singing today, or do you just want to talk?" Discuss further what you found yourself asking students, or why you found yourself rather asking students this in the midst of the global pandemic, and how maybe that continues on today in terms of how you approach students, not relative to the pandemic, but just life in general.
Well, life in general, and teaching other individuals to sing, it's very personal. I mean, we are our instruments, and the way that we think about and want to communicate music is very important. And so, a lot of times, sometimes students would come in overwhelmed by something that, from something that happened in a previous class or something happening within their personal life. And so, I don't need specifics, but over time, I've developed the ability to sense when someone has an energy that's open and accessible to learning versus they're really thinking about everything else that has gone wrong, in which case the learning can't take place or is impeded. So I am also a neuroscience nerd, I'm going to say, not a specialist, but the curiosity and the fascination with the brain and how it functions.
Mhm.
And to get folks to understand that, okay, you need to calm your central nervous system down. So I would ask that question because if a student wanted to share something, then I open myself up to listen. And if really what they just needed was a few minutes in the room to pull themselves together, I would leave the room and give them that space because then we could come in and we could actually have a successful lesson.
Right.
And so sometimes it's I jokingly say that the 100 level psych class that I took in undergraduate school does not always help me in what I do, but it has brought an awareness to me to know when a student needs to be seen and heard
Right.
in order to like let go of something or just be able to just breathe and settle.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it's something that resonates, for everyone really, regardless of your profession or the context of your workplace. That's a great lesson for everyone. We're going to pivot a little bit here. Could you discuss your perspective on student transition from high school to college, and particularly the role that you've played as a mentor? I know you were a mentor to one of the Ad Astra College Access students. So, can you talk a little bit about your role as a mentor and what you feel is the importance, the critical importance of mentorship?
I will say I stumbled into mentorship. I was led because I didn't see myself that way, but I had students who would say, you were important, you mentored me, and I'm like, okay. I it's challenging because you want to be encouraging, but there has to be a level of truthfulness and honesty without discourage it,
Right.
being discouraging. Um, I work to help students to understand that, well, transitioning from high school into a college program, depending upon the prior experience of the student, their background, everyone doesn't have the same experiences. So in working with someone and hopefully helping them to understand that what they have is unique to themselves and to don't play the comparison game, that people come in at different levels. And if you realize that you're not where someone else is, then you have to make the decision to work harder to grow and improve what it is that is your unique talent and what it is that you are bringing to the table. And hopefully, in our program, peers are supportive of each other. Also, because musical theater, the arts, it's a business, understanding that there are different levels. So deciding what is it that you want. You're coming into a program
Right.
to learn and to grow. So to identify for yourself what your weaknesses are, what your strong points are, and then to how are you going to improve your weaknesses over time. It's building blocks. I have students who I will take ownership of it. I coined the phrase, "This is not microwavable." So there's no immediacy to this. It is process and it is growth and it comes in increments. But I also tell my students acknowledge your own growth first. Don't
Yeah,
immediately step and say, well, I didn't like. Start with what it is that you did like and what it is that you were successful with and what went well. Because then you can look at that and take that experience or information from that experience to help to change or modify what it is that you did not like. So I really work to get students to not jump immediately to negativity
excellent.
and to be
It,
patient with themselves.
absolutely. Absolutely. Essential characteristics. What do you find, generally speaking, are some common challenges, potential pitfalls that students that you interact with are facing today, given the current landscape of, digital world we live in, whatever the case might be, and what kind of discuss what you feel is our role as educators in helping to empower students to overcome some of those potential obstacles.
The digital world that we live in today and social media, that goes back to that comparison. Um, I I I work to ask students, um, you see a result, but you don't know the process or the steps that it took for that person to achieve that result. So it is there wasn't an immediacy to this. This is not, this person didn't boom happen that it was there. That it took some time, and that's where patience comes in. Planning is important. I do tell students to be careful what they post on social media, because once you get to the level where you're starting to audition for things, folks will go on to social media to see what they find, what they see, to see if the person that was just in front of them really is who that person is. And they use social media to assess that decision. Also, that I do tell a number of my students that being cast in a show while you're a student at the university is not an indication of what your future will be in this business. You still want to grasp and take everything, absorb everything that you can from your educational experience to help you work to build and establish a career. And everyone's path to that will be different. So to be sure that they have someone that they can speak to that they know will be honest with them,
Right.
and to be able to filter through certain things to to take take what you think will be beneficial and let the rest of it go. And I say that in a lesson with a student. I can share a certain vocal exercise with them and I will say, go play with this. If it doesn't work, then let's come back, talk about, let's figure out what that's the why it's not working, because then we can change it. Or trust me, there I have more tools in my tool chest, so we can figure out something else that will work for you and the individual that you are, and for your voice and you as a person.
Is spot on. No, I appreciate that. Well, before we end, I want to offer you an opportunity to share any final thoughts or takeaways for our listeners.
Personally, this has been a journey. I mean, for me, it's something that's continuous. I am very appreciative that I get to do something that I enjoy doing. I get to act with the individuals, I mean, the students, and collaborate with faculty members. I mean, you can make a tangent between a number of things. All things are connected. And I think that when we lose that sense of connectedness, we can lose a part of ourselves. You can have a plan, but you go into each day to be present within that day and to get as much from it as you can. I learn as much from my students as hopefully, or as they learn from me. So, and I also say to myself that when I stop being curious, it'll probably be time for me to stop doing this.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's exactly right. Yeah, great reflections. I thank you for sharing those. So as we wrap up this episode, a huge thank you goes out to our guest, Dr. Harrison, for sharing her expertise. I also want to thank our listeners for your continued support as we explore together the international educational landscape and horizon. Until next time, this is Dean Cantu for the Future Insight Podcast, where tomorrow begins today. Take care and stay well.